trying to expand your business in today's world, especially when you're getting started or you don't have large amounts of funds, can be one of the hardest things to do. And honestly, I never thought I'd get to a point where I could hire employees, especially starting in certain industries where you don't have to have them right out the gate, right? Like, whether you're investing in being a real estate agent, a lender, or just really any small business, you hit a point where like you feel like you can't hire anyone to get help. You have to do it all yourself. And that's like terrible. Especially like me, I got 3 kids. The last thing I need to be doing is doing all of this myself. And I didn't even know there was a possibility to get help outside the country or anything. And, I struggled for years, assuming that I couldn't do anything. And, being someone who was in the military, I really enjoyed being in charge of people, and not the power aspect, not the ability to boss people around. It's the fact that you get to have like a team that you run. You're running a team to get things and execute. And I was really missing that in my business. Couple years into it, after, a failed business as a mobile notary, moving into being a real estate agent, I eventually stumbled across the idea that, hey, you can hire virtual assistants. And I'm like, sir, what is a virtual assistant? Well, a virtual assistant is obviously someone who is virtual. They're working from somewhere in the world. It could be inside the United States or any country in the world, doesn't matter. But there's someone who's not physically in an office with you, they're working somewhere else. And I was like, that's great. How does that help me? Well, I was sat through this hour-long presentation about a year and a half ago, and it was held by Justin Nelson, who's CEO of CRocket, also part of eXp Realty. And, he shared obviously his company that helps hire VAs, but really just went through everything. And at the end of it, I'm like, how do I get those in my life? And, I kind of jumped the gun really quick in the beginning. At the time, it was about $3,000 for them to service finding a VA. And I'll be honest with you, I knew I probably could figure out how to do it myself. I could just, wing it and say, like, if I could hire myself, I don't need someone to do it for me. But when it came down to it, I really didn't know how to go about that. I wasn't really comfortable doing it, but I had the funds from recent closings, so I'm like, I'm going to go for it. I knew I wanted to open up a new form of marketing, which was putting myself on YouTube and making it happen. And I was like, okay, I don't want to sit down and edit videos. There's just no way. As a father trying to figure things out, I'm not going to edit videos. I don't have the time for that. And I realized, I'm like, what? That's going to be my first hire. That's it. I'm going to hire a video editor and someone who can manage my YouTube channel. And, jump into it. December of 2021, I was like, all right, I'm doing it. And they had a major typhoon in the Philippines, which is where CRocket sources most of their VAs. And it delayed weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I finally hit my first hiring process, where CRocket finds the people and they bring like 6 to 10 candidates who are willing and able and qualified for your position. And I sat down, I worked with the team, I interviewed a bunch of people, came to obviously my video editor who has been with me since that time, January of 2021 or 22, which is brave. And, it was an amazing experience, but it was also a really hard one. I mean, throughout all of 2022, I learned a lot along the way. I had to remember what it's like being in charge of someone and taking care of them. And sometimes I was like, man, am I being too lenient? Am I not being lenient enough? Am my day off policy and stuff like that? Obviously, technically they are contractors, okay? And I want to touch on that real quick before I go further in my journey and my experience and some of the pitfalls I found, because it's not all great. There are a lot of negatives to using virtual assistants that no one ever really wants to talk about. They just assume like there are these superhuman people that are out there and they're going to solve all your problems, but they're not. So a lot of VAs are sourced in the Philippines. Philippines is one of the most common areas that people source VAs from. And being an American, I've obviously traveled a lot of countries around the world, some first world, some third. And I'm very grateful for that because it kind of keeps me more open-minded and more cultured. And I see a lot of my fellow agents who get really rolled up in this idea is they look at the Philippines and they go there because there's like cheap VAs. They're like, cheap, cheap, cheap. It's always focused around money. And that might be an initial reason to go out and do that. But I can promise you, I've been amazed in so many ways besides that. But the Philippines is one of the most common area that people hire VAs from in the US. It's like they're usually about 12 hours difference or so, give or take, depending on what coast you are. And obviously, if you're working days for you, they are working nights, like midnights for their schedule. My editor actually works 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. Pacific time because that is set up for, being a video editor, I don't need him during his night hours. So in order to help him and his girlfriend, because he's also a virtual assistant, I allow him to work during those daylight hours. And I'll be honest with you, I think it was one of the best things I did for his position. But I also have another position that I hired recently, and I'm not able to do that. Like, it has to be during my day shift hours because it is an executive assistant position. But when it comes to VAs, there's a lot of different things that people hire from the Philippines and things like that. And that's where I hired Brave from. And, going back now to where, learning through that first year, I really started to learn a lot of things. And I also went through the process of hiring my own VA without Sphere Rocket's help. I ended up hiring a second one using them to assist me. And I learned a lot along the process, setting 30, 60, 90-day goals. How do you bring someone on to hire? Not having training in place when you're trying to do that. And like all this stuff in between that was just absolutely chaotic trying to figure it out. And, I have learned a lot of things, but I've also learned there's some pros, cons, and to everything, from hiring to utilizing VAs. And I'm going to cover all that right now. And before I get to like some of the pros and cons, one thing I am going to tell you is, you have to preface this that it's all very dependent on your situation. And you have to be careful that you're doing things the right way. Obviously, in my system, the Tired Agent Blueprint, I'm going to have a full in-depth class on how to hire your own VA if you obviously don't have the money, how to raise capital if you don't have the money to do that, and everything in between, 30, 60, 90 days, PDFs. I'm giving it all to you, exactly everything that I use now that I hire my VAs and the process I go about and how I record training for them to make sure they know exactly what to do within the first 90 days of being hired. But everyone assumes, VAs are superhuman. The reality is they're just human beings. Like, they have wants and needs and family, problems and solutions. They have it all, but they're not superhuman. Okay. The pros to having VAs are many. One, it's going to be a lot cheaper than hiring someone in the United States. Not always, but I will say you tend to get more for what you're paying. You're going to get more value out of that. They're going to have 4-year degrees. They're going to have prior work experience. And typical VAs in the Philippines, starting pay typically ranges from $3 to $10 an hour. It really depends on what they're doing. Most of them are $3 to $5 an hour. And a lot of times it's for basic administrative tasks. It can be video editing, which can be more complicated. I've even seen CEO positions hired from the Philippines and stuff like that for like basic companies and things like that don't require a physical presence. And the money's a huge thing. I mean, you look at like the reality, right? Nowadays in the United States, most Americans are just so lazy and they're not willing to put in the work. Like, they're a minimum wage employee with no experience and they think they should get paid $40 an hour without putting in any work. And that's just sad. In the Philippines, my experience has been almost all of them. Obviously, there's always bad eggs, but almost all of them are hardworking. They're out here to make a living for themselves. Like, they're not as spoiled as us in the United States are. So there's a lot of good you come from that. Now, another pro is they're not employees, right? There are certain tax codes set up that you have to make sure you talk to your CPA about to make sure that you don't have any liabilities or issues with paying them. But obviously, my VAs are contractors by law. They're not my employees. If they wanted to have side jobs, I tell all my VAs, hey, remember, you're contractors. As long as like the work that I need is getting done, I don't care what you do. Like, that is like, you are in a position in a way of life that can really benefit you and your family for years to come. And like I always say, like, I'm always very grateful for having them there. And that's a huge pro, is because obviously like having an employee in the United States is expensive. There's a lot of costs that go into that. And to be honest with you, put your tinfoil hat on. I really do believe the United States is setting up to destroy the middle class and destroy small business. Because you know what? It's a lot easier when all the big ones control everything for them. And as a small business owner and getting started, you have to do whatever you can to gain an edge, right? I'm not saying break laws. I'm not saying do anything like that. Like, stay within your realm and your reign. But at the same time, hey, if it's available to you, why not use it? And big companies like Amazon, guess what? They use VAs too. So don't think they're not. When you think about hiring overseas, a lot of people think that's negative. But the great thing is like there are a lot of tasks that you don't need to hire someone in the United States to do, like administrative tasks, video editing, stuff like that. Like, hey, guess what? You're not an Alex Hormozy. You're not some famous person who's out here who needs like a $10,000 a month editing team following you around. Hey, maybe that's one day you'll get there. Maybe me too. But if you're not at that point, you don't need these massive like costs and teams and things like that. And VAs can solve that problem for you. I mean, with technology and the way it is today, like, it is a huge pro. Like, they can make phone calls for you. My executive assistant, Justine, she has a virtual phone number to make phone calls on my behalf. So like it's in a position where you don't need them to be physical, okay? But there are cons to it, okay? So one of the biggest cons is, guess what? They're not physically with you. So if culture is a big thing, that's gonna be one of the biggest struggles I found, especially as I hired my second, is like, how do I maintain culture? How do I include them as a team? So even though they're contractors, technically, I call them my international team. And I really do mean that. I care about how their family is. I care about what problems they're having. I wanna make sure I have a system in place to where, hey Cameron, I get time off. Because even though they're contractors, they're not machines. They don't need to be working 24/7. Okay? And the raises and bonus structures, even though they're contractors, I still want to take care of them. They're putting in work, and them doing work allows me to make more profit for my company, which in turn allows me to feed my family. That's a lot. And I'll be honest with you, one of the recent goals I had a big goal. Is like, in 5 years, I want to be in a position to where I can bring all of them, either I can go to the Philippines and have a great time over there, I can bring them to California and go to Disneyland. And that's a crazy goal, but that's something like, look, I am very passionate about those who are working hard for my dream and making it happen. They deserve to be taken care of. Whether they're contractors or employees, it doesn't matter. So one of the biggest things and cons is I see a lot of agents have problems building culture. And there's a right way to do that and a wrong way to do that. Again, and that's, a lot I teach inside my course, but it's one of those things where you have to make sure you know what your core values are and you have them understand it, because they're working for you and taking care of cast. Maybe they're speaking with clients. You want to make sure they understand where the core values are and what you stand for. So the con can be definitely hard, that it's hard to get that structure. Another con could be, hey, guess what? If you aren't willing to go through the process of hiring your own VA, which I will get to here after these pros and cons, guess what? It's gonna be some pain for you. Okay, so like I said, SphereRocket now, and they're one of the better companies I've seen. There's a lot of companies out there that'll be like, oh, we'll hire VAs for you. The reality is, a lot of those companies, they'll hire, like, oh, we'll hire a VA for you that, is $7, $8 an hour. What they're not telling you is they're paying the VA $2, and that company's taking the rest on top of a flat service fee for hiring. And that's highway robbery. So the reason SphereRocket is one of my favorite companies, and there might be more out there at this point that I don't know about, but they're one of the companies I use because I know Justin, met him, he's a great guy, and he means well. And the one thing I love about SphereRocket is, once, obviously you pay more upfront to hire, but then the VA, all the money you pay goes straight to the VA. They have no part in that. But they also supply training on the back end if you need it. And for those of you who don't have the culture or the things in place, hey, having that level of support if you're only hiring a couple of VAs is great. I will tell you, I think they're moving away from the $3,500, a single time hire for VA, and now they're moving to a $12,000 a year, plan, which allows you to hire 3 VAs per month, and it's definitely a high ticket model. Sometimes I guess they will do single hires, but it's something they're really moving away from, especially as it gets more competitive for their services. So that's one of the cons, is if you're not willing to do it yourself, you're gonna pay, and you're gonna pay some good money. Do I think it's worth it as a business owner? Absolutely. But if you're just getting started, or you barely have enough funds to budget in a monthly cost, guess what? You have to, sit back, and you might have to wait a little bit until you have those funds available to do that, that headhunting fee is really what it is. Another con I have found is, you have to be in position to where you can afford to pay them. And even though it's so little per month, I see a lot of agents who get very zealous in trying to make it happen, to where they might struggle financially by hiring that position. Now remember, as a business owner, when you go to hire any position, I don't care if it's a VA or employee, you are going to intend that hire is going to make you more money. Like I said, I care very deeply for them. I'm very concerned about their personal life, how things are going. Not overly bountiful, like some possessive employer, but I care. But the reality is like, what they do needs to generate more money than what I'm paying them, because without that, the business doesn't work. It can't operate. But the great thing is, there are ways to cut costs, which I'll get to towards the end of this video, to where I actually found a way to where you can potentially hire a VA and then have their costs for free to you if you don't need to use them full time. But that can be a con, and you have to make sure you weigh the options before you do it, because I've had times where there was like a month straight last year when those interest rates went up. I had to pay on credit card. I had to pay my VA on credit card, and it was tough, because but remember, you're hiring someone, and they're dependent on your livelihood. And if you're not willing to take that responsibility, then this is not something you should get into. Heck, you shouldn't hire anyone. Because if you're not in the position, because like you might not make money one month, but guess what? They rely on you to pay them to feed their families and to take care of their loved ones. And if you can't supply that money, guess what? You're gonna be in a world of pain to do so. Now, I want to get into some good information, which is like, how do you hire your own VA? Because let's say, you know what, Cameron, I don't have the money to go to Sphere Rocket. I don't want to go through that. I want to hire my own VA. My first thing is fantastic. I have done it because I wanted to prove that I could do it. Heck, for my course, I intend to go through the process of hiring my own VA to show you it's possible, and I'm going to document the whole process. Cannot wait to do that. But there are really two main areas in the world through all my research and trial and error that I've found to get virtual assistants if you're looking to kind of save money but get more experience for that. And that's the Philippines and it's Eastern Europe. Now, Eastern Europe is one that isn't really talked about too much in the United States, and if you're outside of the tech community. So Eastern Europe tends to be for positions that are very technical skilled, web development, apps, things like that, but it's also not as cheap. Now, cultures are different in both places of the world, and what I am going to tell you right now is just my experience of dealing with them in terms of a hiring process. So, on the Philippines, pays going to be some of the lowest when you look at the average of VAs. The experience is good, but they are very reserved, right? Like they're not going to tell you like this is how it's going to be. Not that you can't find that, but a lot of times they're very respectful, which to be honest can be perfect. And if that's what you want, that's awesome. Obviously, I have 2 VAs from the Philippines. I love it. I love the culture. And Jesus, you know, many friends in the Navy, married girls from the Philippines. Like it's a culture I'm very familiar with, and I get more so every single day and month that I have them with me. But you know, Eastern Europe, they're more upfront. So depending what position you're hiring, you might want someone from Eastern Europe who's upfront and is going to tell you how it is. Like, you know, sometimes for an executive assistant, sometimes you might want someone who's going to push back a little bit. They're going to say, hey, Cameron, remember, you said you were going to do this. This is on your schedule, and we need to get this done so that way I can do this, this, and this to make sure we get on task for our today's goals. And that could mean a lot. Or maybe you do need that web development. Now, obviously, I went through the process. That second VA I ever hired was from Eastern Europe. I think it was Kosovo was the country he was from. And I learned a lot. I will tell you, I got lucky a little bit. I went through the correct hiring process. Thankfully, because I used Sphere Rocket before, I was like, okay, I get how this works. The only thing I need to do is figure out how to find these applicants. So I did some research, came across a website called jobracks.eu. And this is a website based out of England, but this website primarily focuses on Eastern Europe hiring. And you can limit what countries it goes to. And I didn't do that in the beginning. I did all of them because I'm like, it's Eastern Europe, right? Like I heard in the Philippines, like this has to be the same. Well, I created my job application, very detailed, you want to make sure whenever you go to hire and do this yourself, you want to have an extremely detailed position. And we'll get to that here in a second when I tell you the pros and cons of this. So, you know, in Eastern Europe, everything went great. I went through the process of, you know, got a ton of applications, waded through them, told them, hey, today, on this day, from this time to this time, I am holding interviews for this position. If you can make it, great. If not, I'm sorry, this will not work. Got rid of all the ones who didn't need the job. Came down to it, had about 6 applicants, sat down one after the other, boom, 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 asked questions, tested them, this and that. This was mainly for web development at the time, and came across someone who, you know, I was like, boom, this is the guy, hired him, and it was great. But I learned some things real quick about Eastern Europe hires. As Kosovo was recently inducted into the European Union, which means they use euros. Guess what? The hidden problem with hiring VAs overseas is you run into currency exchange issues. And man, did I learn quick about this problem. In the Philippines, it's not really an issue. Currency exchange is pretty simple, and generally, obviously the US dollar is stronger, so it works out, but it is something you have to work through, and I use a payment transfer service called Wise. In Eastern Europe, the euro is usually stronger than the dollar. So when I went to go pay him for the first time, I realized, oh, I'm getting hit with a negative currency exchange. Now, it's not too much, and I'm like, okay, I can work with this. This isn't too bad. I can work with this. And I started to find even faster that I'm like, wait, then he comes back, he's like, hey Cameron, appreciate the pay. My bank hit me with a $250 fee because it's a foreign currency on top of the exchange rate. I'm like, crap, okay, I'll make up for that. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, and all of a sudden I'm getting hit with another fee because I'm getting paid to current exchange it, a fee to deposit it to him on TransferWise. And then I had to get hit with another fee to make up for his fee for the bank. And because I had to send him more money, the currency rate would go up and then his fee would go up. And it was just a constant game. And all of a sudden I'm paying a couple $100 more per month that I didn't even want to spend in the first place. So instead of saving money, I'm now paying massively more for this position. And I realized very quick, I got in more than I chew and I had to let him go. Now, it was a tough decision. It was one of the first times I ever had to fire someone and let someone go. But, and I could apologize more for it. And we're still friends on LinkedIn to this day, but the fact is I was open and honest about what happened. And I learned real quick that while Eastern Europe, I enjoyed the culture for certain positions, I do feel technical wise in terms of websites and app development, you are gonna get some very, very good experience. The hard thing is getting to the right people because even sites like jobrack.eu, a lot of them use euros. And if you don't have a bank account in Europe to transfer that money to, you're really going to get hit with fees. So it's a dance. It's really hard. And while I think the culture is great over there, you tend to find a little bit better working hours because they're only 12 hours ahead or 8 or 6 hours. It really varies, but it's not too bad. You learned real quick that it wasn't the right thing. In the Philippines, it's just some of the best ways because it's just the way it's positioned to the United States and the way the currency exchange is, and a lot of the banks are very open with receiving US dollars. It's an easier process to pay your VAs. And ultimately, as a business owner, the easier something is, the better it is to do. Now, before you even go to hire your first VA, I'm telling you, you need to sit down and you need to think, one, is this something I should do? Am I in position to take on the responsibility to pay someone and have them need me to make things happen to feed their family? If you cannot accept that, this is not for you. Do not do it. Go out there and try to make some fucking money. Because the fact is, I've seen so many agents who do this and they bit off more than they can chew, and then they just let them go. It's like, I picked up my pink shirt today. I don't want to wear a pink shirt. I'm going to wear a blue shirt. And it's like, they're people. They're human beings. And they're relying on you, especially if they went through a competitive hiring process, to be hired by you just to be let go. Now, again, in the last month and a half, I went through the process. I hit a point where I'm like, I need an executive assistant / client manager, success manager. And I hired someone through Sphere Rocket again. Obviously I knew how to do it myself, but I didn't have the time. I had the funds, didn't have the time. That's the benefit of using full service. And I found out very quick that I'm like, he wasn't very good with technology, and I'm like, I got too preemptive. And all the rules I'm telling you now, didn't listen to him. And I had to let him go. And I gave him great recommendations. I did 2 weeks, paid the final 2 weeks. But, it got me to where I am now, and now I'm very thankful about where my assistant is now, taking things and getting them done. But you have to make sure, once you know that you are willing to take on the responsibility, what do you need? What position do you need? And obviously I can be in depth and help you go through this in my course, but the big thing is you need to sit down and be like, what do I need to do? And my first recommendation, especially for assuming you're in a small business or someone who doesn't have that much money, is the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out, what should I be doing to generate more income? Or what do I need to do to continue to generate income that is kind of a waste of my time? It's kind of like the dollar per hour analogy. Like, what high level activities do you as the owner need to do to make the most money? And what are all the small tasks that you don't need to be doing? Or what is that marketing strategy or that method that you should be doing that you just don't have time for because you're busy doing all the other stuff? And you got to figure that out. And then once you know that, build out a detailed list of who do you need? What's the name of the position? What are they going to be doing? What hours are they working? What's the pay going to be doing? Just like any company, any hiring process, you build out a full detailed list. Now, moving forward, we're going to assume everything's in the Philippines. So assuming you're going to the Philippines, you can do this yourself. It's called onlinejobs.ph. And this is a government, I think it's a government website. I don't quite remember, but it's where you can go, you can pay. It's a 1 year, it's a monthly fee, but you can cancel it. No questions asked once you hire a VA, and you can go there. Now, I will tell you the downfall of this is you're going to get bombarded with applicants, and a lot of them are not going to be good. So you have to make sure you structure and follow the next steps I'm about to tell you. So you have your detailed position. You know you're ready to be a big boy or a big girl and pull up your pants, and you're going to be responsible for someone, not your kids, someone who needs your money to survive. So you have your detailed description of what you're looking for. You go on the website, you sign up, you submit your job posting, and you're going to start getting applications. Well, your first goal is to decide how long am I leaving applications open for, and what day am I doing interviews. I know it might seem very tempting to say, oh, I'm going to do interviews on this day and this day. Oh, this applicant can meet this day. Okay, don't bend to their schedule. They bend to your schedule. Look, the reality is you're the business owner. You are busy. Hiring is not simple. It takes a lot of time, and guess what? You're wasting time not making money. You're going to spend it. So you have to make sure you understand that there is one day that you are going to hire someone, and that's the day. You set up however many hours. You can extend it or reduce it, but you're like, this is the day. And you give everyone, say, hey, from this time to this time, we are hiring. And I love using Zoom. You give them a Zoom link. Here's a Zoom link. Here's the calendar invite. I will see you then. And depending on the position, you can give them a task as well beforehand. It's like, hey, let's say it's a social media. It's like, hey, before you meet me, here are my brand guidelines. I would like for you to create me this asset. Or if it's a video editor, say, hey, if you have examples of your editing ability, I would love to see them, especially if you have any examples of previous work you've done, and also what tools you use. You can pre-build this into your list, but here's great. I agreed to your application, I reviewed it, I think you are ready to go for this interview, here you go. And now what you can do is you have that interview day. Now, before the interview, obviously you're going through everyone, choose how many applicants, and make sure you screen them. Make sure you look at what they're doing. What's their previous experience? What are they bringing to the table? Sometimes they can ask for like, how much are you looking for in pay? And all those questions. You bring them to the interview day. On the interview day, you're sitting down, you're going through everyone. And don't just come with like, hey, how are you? Small talk. You want to find out, are they really telling the truth about their experience? Are they really good at what they do, or good enough for the position you're hiring for? What other obligations do they have? Do they have a family, a wife, kids? Like what's going to cause them to have maybe issues during the employment cycle? And it's not a negative thing. You just want to know this. And also at the same time, you're gauging them. You're talking. You're trying to figure out, what kind of person is this? Oh, and almost forgot, I make all my applicants go to Tony Robbins, and you can go there and send them a link. It's a free personality test. I do it for all my applicants. It is just it doesn't cost them anything. And I promise you, if they miss anything that you require them to do, you don't want to hire them. You need people who are going to get things done. I don't care what position it is. So by taking that personality test, you're going to figure out what type of personality they are. Like what makes them tick? What are their strong suits? And it's just another great tool for those interviews, because you will get that ahead of time. Say, hey, send it to me before the meeting. And you get to go through it, you can review it, and that way you know what you're getting into before you get into it. That's what I've done with all my positions, so I know exactly what type of person I'm looking for, and when that time comes, I'm able to dive in and get it done. So, when you sit down and meet with them, you're trying to gauge. Like you're just trying to gauge what type of person they are. What's their strong suits? What are their fears? What are they trying to do in 5 years? Where are they trying to go? I tell all my VAs, I don't care what you're doing in 5 years. This is my company, and this is my child in business, right? I don't expect my contractors and anyone that works for me to care about it like I do. That's unrealistic. But I do understand that they have goals, they have drive. What are they trying to do? My executive assistant, she's currently going to school during the daytime for, a business degree. And she's doing executive assistance, but I've made her my client success manager, and she's getting to see how the money works, the flow, the clients, staying in touch via weekly emails, all this stuff. And she's like, I asked her the other day, I'm like, hey, how do you think this is, helping your college? And she's like, honestly, I feel like I am light years ahead of the rest of my class. Like, that's awesome. I don't know, that excites me. I don't know if that excites you, but it excites me. I love that I can do that for her. okay? Now, sometimes you might need more than one interview day. Most times you probably could get it done in one day. But if you find out you have a lot of applicants and you have some strong ones, you can bring in the ones, you keep them in a waiting room. And in the Zoom, you just keep putting people back in the waiting room. And then when you find the ones you like, you can go to the ones who obviously didn't make it, let them know, hey, sorry, you did not make it. Best of luck. And then you have your remainder. And then you can bring them back in one more time to give them one more shot. And then you take them out, sit down for a couple minutes and just think about it. Weigh all the pros and cons. Look at their paperwork again. Were they really a good fit? Do you think they'll make it? And then once you make a decision, you land on it. You do it. And I can tell you, when you actually start to figure out being an employer and what you need to do for your people, you really start to realize, wow, like I'm only paying this person like $600 a month and I'm getting a lot of work done. Once you figure out and hire that right position that you need, I can't tell you how much of your life you can get back. Or you can just expand, you can do things. You don't have to worry about it because technology allows you to get things done. Now, little recap is like, how do you work with your VAs when they're virtual? So there's a couple tools I use. I use Slack. Slack is free. You don't have to pay for it. I don't. And Slack is a great communication tool. It allows you to do send gifts and videos and documents all for free. You create a Slack channel and you can set it up for your team. It's awesome. It's free. I encourage everyone to use that. Obviously Zoom. So especially when you hire someone for the first 90 days, you need to make sure you meet them on Zoom every day. And Zoom is a great tool. It's very easy to use. Now, they do have Slack rooms I think you can get into, and there's other tools out there, but I use Zoom for Zoom meetings because I already pay for it to meet with clients and things like that. So it's just easier. I have a repeating Zoom meeting every single day during the work week that I meet with my clients. Obviously, Google Suite. Most of your VAs, they're going to need an email address. So I love Google Suite because I allow them to have their own email address so they can get things done. They communicate with clients or vendors or whatever they need to do. And it still keeps everything in brand. You don't have to. Highly recommend it though. For pay, I use Wise, formerly known as TransferWise. Wise is an amazing tool that allows you to send currency. It's very convenient. I pay my VAs every single week on Friday. I have them send me their invoice on Thursday, so I know how much to pay them, and it's great. It's very seamless. They do charge, so I do direct deposit, or not deposit, but I send it straight from my checking account. The fees for sending money, not including currency exchange, is it's about just over $2. So it's not too crazy. And I take that hit personally. So that as an employer, I take that hit because they work outside the US. Obviously, there's going to be a hit for a TransferWise to do it. Now, if they're working inside the United States and they have a TransferWise account, I don't believe there's a transfer fee actually. So that's a cool little bonus if you hire a VA inside the United States. Now, what other tools do I use? So I also use, obviously, I love BombBomb or Vidyard, but you can do the same thing with Zoom. So when I go to hire VAs, it's important, I didn't do it the first hire, I did it with the second one, that whatever you do or the VA is going to be doing, you record a training. How to use Slack? How does your team communicate? What is your company about? You record training on it, and once you do it once, you'll never have to do it again. But you can record your screen on Zoom and just keep it somewhere. Keep it in a Google Drive somewhere, and it's awesome. Now, I also, when it comes to project management, there's a lot of tools out there, but project management is very important. And depending what you do, maybe you don't need it right away, but it's great. So obviously, Trello is a free option. It's a basic form. I have had people use Asana, and Asana is great. I wasn't a huge fan of it. What I use now for our team running 2 companies is I use Monday.com. Now, Mondays.com, for the Marine in me, I love it. There's colors and I love colors, crayons, I love it. But Monday.com is great, but it's not cheap. So if you have a low budget, I don't recommend it. I think Trello does have a free option. Trello can be a great way to start. So Trello could be a great option for someone on a budget. Asana is another good budget option. It's just, I don't know. Wasn't a huge fan of it. Monday.com, I am a huge fan of. I have set up everything in there. I have our core values in there. I have, if they want to request a day off, it's in there. I love it. Having a project management system when you start to get a little bit bigger is very important because you have to make sure culture stays intact and that things are manageable. Also, one day, who knows? Maybe you want to hire a VA who's also a manager and they're doing everything that you're doing now. And you have to make sure they have a software where they can do that to work with the team. It's great. So those are about the major tools I use. And obviously, depending what you do, there's a lot of different tools out there. There's mailing software, there's all kinds of stuff. But in today's virtual world, there are so many things. Oh, and phone number. There it is. I knew I forgot one. Currently I use Line 2, there's Open Phone, there's CallRail. There's a lot of VoIP phone systems out there. So if you need a VA to call for you, in today's day and age, it is so simple. And there's so many solutions out there. And whether you need a dialer or you just need like a phone for them to use for clients, like there's a lot of solutions out there. Go out there and find which one you think is best. I use Line 2 currently. It's okay. I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of it, but it's all right. I've used CallRail before, but it limits your text and stuff like that, so I'm not a huge fan of it. I only use a virtual phone for clients. I stick with Slack for all team communication because there's an app on your phone. It's easy. You can message, you can screenshot it. It's just a lot easier, so that's what I use. But those tools really allow you to do whatever you want. And I promise you, if there's a VA or something you need in your business, there's a VA for it. And the hard thing is going through all that process. That's why if you are in the position and you are going to be needing that help, or you're another real estate professional or agent who they want to get more leverage, more profit as soon as possible and get time back in their life, then the Target Agents course that I created is where I'm going to be going over all of this. What I told you right now is really only scratching the surface. I intend to do a whole section inside that course detailing how I'm hiring a VA. I need to hire a social media manager, and I am going to go through the entire process, and you're going to follow me along with me as I hire that VA. I'm going to record everything, and I cannot wait because I'm going to show you how to do it myself. And while yes, I've gotten to the point where I like full service, I'm going to show you how it's done doing it myself. I'm going to share you everything you need when it comes to hiring a VA. 30, 60, 90-day goals. I'm going to share with you the link to the software I use. I'm going to show you how I set it up. I'm going to show you how I communicate with them, how I keep company culture. How do you give gifts to them? How do you include them in your life? I'm going to give you all of it because when you do it right and you actually see them for the humans that they are and the international team that they are, I can tell you that they will bend, back over back for you. And it's one of the greatest blessings I've ever found in my life. And if you're a small business, you're in that position where you're trying to grow and you're a little tight, I promise you to do that. And hey, if you want to, I try and respond to comments as much as possible. Go ahead and subscribe, and leave a comment below. If you have any quick questions, let me know below. I'm happy to answer it because there's a lot more to this story. I only touched the surface, even in this, 38 minutes? Yeah. And there's a lot more to it. But I can tell you that it's one of the greatest things I've ever found in my life and my business. And while I do look forward to the day that I can create jobs inside the United States, the reality is it's hard to do that when you're just starting out, especially in this industry. So if you want any help, reach out in the comments below. Or you can reach out to, go to targetagents.com/special. The course isn't fully out yet, so if you sign up now, you will get a massive discount for $297 instead of the $2,000 it will be once it is launched. So can't wait to see you, and guys, look forward to seeing you in the next episode.